are we reacting, our school districts reacting when we give that diagnostic test in kindergarten and find out the kids have this kind of low word recognition? What happens, as my law identifies, that when they get to the 4th grade or the 3rd grade guarantee? And what that means is that every kid should be proficient at 3rd grade. That is the base of it. At 4th grade, mandatory. The language in law says the school district shall, not may, but shall provide intervention services for kids that are below proficient in any form. And any form means after school, during school day, Saturday school, summer school, below proficient. So what I want you to look at is the boys that we are working with right now. What we did was a longitudinal study of all these 33 high schools. We're looking at 13 school districts throughout the state of Ohio. Again, that's in your booklet. You can see those very specifically, what school districts they are. But Cleveland is not alone, so you've got to look at this like this is not just what's wrong with Cleveland. Because frankly, this dilemma of what we have done in terms of miseducation or no education of African American males is across the United States. When you talk about the Canada Project, or when you talk about the Harvard study, and all those studies talk about the 50% or below graduation rate for African American males. But I want you to just look at this, and if we start here, we can look at this. The first graph is talks about reading. And when you can look at reading, you can see that in the 4th grade, 51% of the kids were tested below proficient. Now let me just get to that, because that's a state mandated test. That's a test that basically says that in 4 different categories. A kid could be basic, he could be limited, basic, proficient, accelerated, and advanced. Limited, frankly, means that the kid absolutely cannot read. Basic means that he has some language, can read, sorta, but doesn't really understand what he's reading, so there's not the comprehension. And then we go to proficient, which means he can read it and he can understand it. Accelerated simply means that if you got a kid in 4th grade and he's doing 5th or 6th grade work, that kind of thing. So now we're looking at the same kid that I'm working with now, who is in the 4th grade in 2004, and we're seeing that 51% below proficient. If I go to the next chart, which is writing, or should be writing, I don't see writing on here. Yeah, the 3rd chart is writing. Then we're looking at, in the 4th grade, 50% below proficient. Again, these are, when you see the bars, they're endemic of when these tests were given throughout those school years. When we get to math, 62% below proficient. And then, okay, these are the kids that tested in the 4th grade. Let's go to the 6th grade, and what did they do? In the 6th, I'm using this as my benchmark. This sort of tells me what it is. In the 6th grade, these same kids that were in reading in 4th grade, in 6th grade, 57% were below proficient. So basically, it increased. And so the question is, what was the intervention? What were the steps the school district took to intervene to make sure that these kids did better? In math, 67%, in reading, and math, 67%. Then when we get to the kids that we're working with right now, today, and trying to say, how many of these kids can we make sure are promoted to the 10th grade? Because that is our challenge, that is our goal. Our goal is to say, okay, we get them in 9th grade that are at risk. And so the question becomes, what steps do we need to take to make sure they move on to 10th grade, having earned enough credits to move on to 10th grade? Let me back up a little bit and just give you that in its context. The school district can pass kids from kindergarten through 8th grade without any accountability. They can pass regardless of their failing. They can pass regardless of attendance, suspension, whatever. But when they get to the ninth grade, they have to earn enough credits to move on to 10th grade. That's the biggie. So it's at ninth grade, all of a sudden the world stops in terms of the merry-go-round, and they have to prove that they have mastered that subject in order to move on to 10th grade. And you know, frankly, when you get into 10th grade, you have all these rounds of graduation tests, Ohio graduation tests. It starts at 10th grade, which is totally insane in my estimate, because if they fail that test in 10th grade, they then repeat it in 11th grade, then repeat it in 12th grade, and there's no room for any other kind of education, like maybe arts or maybe field trips or exploration or anything. It's just drill down in terms of memorizing that particular test in order to move on to the next, in order to qualify to graduate. So, establishing that factor, this last set of data I need you to pay attention to, because these are the babies that I'm now working with in ninth grade that came into our ninth grade that have the requirement of passing that subject matter in order to move to the 10th grade. So, this September in math, I'll start in reading. This September in reading, 49% of the kids who went to ninth grade, these are black males, were scoring below proficient. In math, 59% of the kids were scoring below proficient. Now let me just take this one for example. In the ninth grade, you got algebra. And the reason they teach algebra in the ninth grade is because that's in preparation for the math concepts in the 10th grade that are on the Ohio graduation test. Now we've just discerned that 59% are not proficient. So they could very easily be in an algebra class. And the teacher is talking about, she's on the board talking about X, Y, Z in this fraction, and the kid doesn't understand multiplication or division or fractions. Now, with that kind of scenario, unless there's serious intervention, what we're looking at is a kid just sitting there and may decide he's going to cut class. And may decide, and if they call on him and he's embarrassed, he's sure enough cutting class. So what's our responsibility at this point? To bring this kid up to grade level, to give him the basic skills, which is really the bedrock of our program. How do we then, because we've identified him, we know he's got problems. So what is our responsibility at that time in terms of constructing that social construction of hope? I want you to go back to the booklet and look at what I'm calling very fondly the spider. It's in the middle of the page. We decided that this kid needs a lot of stuff. We decided he needs everything. Frankly, he needs everything. He needs teachers who know how to teach him. He needs teachers who can take that algebra problem and make it come alive. Or that looks at this kid in terms of him being disengaged totally, sitting in that classroom and says, oh, this baby don't understand fractions. Maybe I'll talk to him after class and decide that he needs some tutoring to bring his skill set up. So let me just go through the spider. We thought parent engagement was critical. When I talked to the juvenile detention home as we were developing this, and the lawyers and the policemen and so on, they said, CJ, many of our parents call them and say, come pick up my baby, I can't do nothing with him. And I'm saying it in that vernacular. So here's a 15-year-old angry at mama, howling at her. But understand that she has said, you better act like a man, or she has said, you're going to be just like your daddy. And when I look at the data on daddy, and I'm not saying in general, but in many cases we're talking about, in the state of Ohio, 71% or 56% black males in prison.